Sweet. This is my idea. This is my mind.
So I have my new idea for Croatia is not the same as
Okay, so we can start. Mr. Ambassador, Madam Minister, distinguished guests, thank you all for coming. Welcome to our conference, Brain Gain in the Balkans, Economic and Development Strategies for a Better Future. My name is Mila Moralic.
And I'm Marina Ređić. Welcome, dobro jutro. We are so pleased to have all of you here, and both of us are Humphrey Fellows from 2017-2018, Arizona State University cohort, and we will be your hosts today somehow.
So before we start our program, I would like to ask the Minister of Education of the Republic of Croatia, Mrs. Blaženka Divjak, to say a few words.
And please one round of applause.
Good morning to everyone. I'm really happy that I'm here and have the opportunity to address you all here, and especially those who are coming from other countries, to welcome you in Zagreb, in Croatia. And as I just learned from His Excellency the American Ambassador, it is the best is to say to the country that is a strong leader in a big region. So welcome to Croatia. And I would like also to thank you, the organizers, for the invitation, and I have opportunity to address you in a few minutes at the beginning of this conference. I would like to also to congratulate to this program, because I think that 40 years it is a really substantial number, but at the same time there are even more importance in a people that have been fellows in the scope of the program, Fulbright program, as well in Humphrey Fellowship program. And I personally actually know quite many of you here in the audience, and I can see that the choice was and still is the best, and that the influence the Humphrey Fellows have in countries, and I can tell for Croatia, it's really something that is very strong, and I really support this program as a minister. I would like also to mention a few things about the educational and the research system in Croatia, with the emphasis on the reform processes we have been delivered or working on. In the scope of the education and research, we have 4 different tracks for the reform processes. The first one is curricular reform for the compulsory education. The second one is reform of the vocational education and training. Then emphasis on relevance of higher education. And the fourth is supporting and enhancing the excellence in research and science, with also stronger links to the innovation and economy as such. So in that sense, I would like also use this opportunity to emphasize that what we have, for example, in the curricular reform is something that is a continuity in several, let's say, governments, because the strategy for education, research and technology has been adopted in 2014, and curricular reform, I would say, even though we have a lot of discussion in public domain, it is a flagship flagship program based on that strategy. So the aim of the reform is to improve the quality, effectiveness, and the labor market relevance of education. But it is not just about the reform of the curricula, but also the change of paradigm of teaching and learning. The emphasis on student-centered teaching and learning, as well as of development of critical thinking, problem solving, and enhancing the motivation of teachers in a school system, as well as interest of students in not just the school learning, but to learn how to learn in the future, because we know that in the fourth industrial revolution time and this rapid change in economy and technology change is very important to equip our students for the future. In that sense, we started with an experimental program that we call the School for Life, that has been started last year in autumn, and 49 primary schools and 25 secondary schools, so the comprehensive school as well as vocational schools participate in that program, and it means that based on the research we have and the follow-up and the continuous evaluation of the program, we also preparing our curricular reform for all schools, and I'm happy that we are going to start in all schools in the next September this year. So I think it's very important that we have not just deliver on of the reform, that we have discussion on how to deliver it, what kind of skills and knowledge we would like to introduce in our new curriculum, but I would also like to see much more argumentation in the public domain and among the professionals as well in the media about the reform. And I think that it is something that is very visible nowadays, but as I said before, it is very important that this kind of argumentation and critical thinking and problem solving we are introducing into the school system, we also recognize as something we would like to support in a public domain, and I'm sure that the Humphrey Fellows also contribute to that sense. I would also like to say just a few words about the challenge for Croatia that is going to be the next year, because next year Croatia is taking over the presidency of the EU Council at a very turbulent moment that has been characterized with some major institutional changes that are following the European Parliament elections and with the new European Commission. Moreover, Croatian presidency will be marked with Brexit, so it's very challenging, as I said. As the newest member state of the EU, we are quite excited about the role we are about to take in a less than a year time, and we are ready to deal with the challenges that this role brings. Secondly, with the beginning of a new decade, new strategic period post-2020, we'll start with the Croatian presidency, so that forward-looking approach will characterize our presidency in all policy areas. There are four main topics that we see as Croatian priorities in education. Firstly, we would like to encourage a debate between the ministers of education about the reforms in education as about investments in people and human potential. We are aware of the fact that there is a growing importance of reforms in education, and we believe that there is a need for a wide political debate among the education ministers about the topic. As I mentioned before, that we are really dealing with in Croatia. Secondly, we plan to continue and hopefully finalize discussions on the strategic framework for cooperation in education and training 2030, based on reflections of our past performance and the debates we have had so far on the vision of future European education and training policy developments. In that context, we shall strive to promote further discussions on developing European education area 2025 and beyond, looking at increasing language competences of our citizens, then also recognizing obstacles to recognition of qualifications and more intensive cooperation between new European universities. More concretely, we focused on the Croatian presidency shall be on the teachers for the future. That's also at the very heart of our curricular reform nowadays in Croatia, because right now we have in a process of continuous education and very intensive training 36,000 teachers. Our idea is to look at the challenges that teachers at all levels of education, in all educational sectors face. New competencies, innovative teaching and learning, rapid societal changes, foreign language requirements, the necessity for a stronger European cooperation in teacher training, increased teachers' mobility. That's also very important, not just in the scope of European Union, but also towards the United States. And we also have to digitalize our society and schools and take into consideration the opportunities with artificial intelligence and variety of other opportunities for cooperation and exchange of ideas that are very important for our development as well. We would like to inspire also debates on the issues that and dedicate our presidency conference to the overarching topic of the European teachers for the future. Last but not the least, we plan to encourage ministerial policy debate on the topic of mobility and brain circulation. Being aware of the fact that this may be a controversial issue, both for those that gain as for those that lose. We see that the circulation of people, and in particular young people, has become not only the national but the European and as well global issues. And that's, at the end, I would like also to emphasize that I understand that you have a full schedule, and many of these topics that I have been mentioned right now, we are going to discuss in much more details. And in that sense, I would like to wish you a very fruitful conference and a lot of opportunities also to enjoy the nice weather here in Zagreb. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. During the final session, we have 3 workshops. We will discuss about innovation and education, and we are so pleased to have Ariana Blažić from your ministry to get her knowledge and experience based on long-term process of helping at least children here to get better education in any region, in any city or in Croatia. So now we are so happy and thrilled to introduce you Mr. Kohorst. He is U.S. Ambassador in the Republic of Croatia. Today he is with us, and I would like maybe to ask him to tell us more how exchange programs such as Humphrey Fellowship encourage and empower societies worldwide. Thank you very much.
Dobar dan. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of our guests here today, and especially Minister Blaženka Divac, whose ministry has been a generous partner in the Humphrey's program in Croatia since its inception more than 25 years ago. I'd also like to recognize our other partners on the Humphrey program and the celebration here today: the Agency for Mobility and EU Programs and the Institute for the Development of Education. The Humphrey program in Croatia is a true partnership between our two countries. Its success would not be possible without the efforts of all of our local partners. Congratulations to our 2 organizers to today's events, Mila Moradic and Marina Radic. Your energy and your vision have brought us all together today. Thank you very much. Welcome also to our speakers who have come from throughout Croatia, the region, and from across the Atlantic to celebrate with us and further cement ties between our countries. Most importantly, welcome Humphrey alumni. This is your celebration. You are the keystone of this program, making its mission of creating mutual understanding between our peoples a reality. This will be an incredible day of learning, sharing, and networking, and the main theme is important and timely. Our goal of the Humphrey Program and all of our exchange programs is to give future leaders of Croatia a professional, educational, and personal experience in the United States that will empower them to improve their communities at home and help us to further cement ties between our countries. We realize that there are challenges to living in Croatia and the region, and potentially more attractive opportunities abroad. However, I would argue, and I hope you agree with me, since you are here, that there is much more to be gained at home. Through your Humphrey Fellowship, you have acquired contacts, experience, and knowledge that is sorely needed in the region. You have something valuable to offer to future generations, and your energy and enthusiasm will encourage them to stay home and do the same. So what I really want to encourage everyone is to come forward and show Croatia the spirit of enthusiasm and the spirit of optimism that's in America. When people ask me what is the main difference in business between Croatia and the United States, it's a spirit of can-do, a spirit of optimism that if we try hard, if we work hard, if we work smart, we can succeed. And when we fail, it's only an opportunity to learn. So pick yourself up and try again. And so what I really encourage all of you as people who have personal experience in the United States is to bring that spirit of America here and show the Croatians. This is a beautiful country with smart people. As I was telling the minister, I often hear about this is a small country. I don't think of Croatia as a small country. It is a center of stability in the region, and it is part of a large region. And with your enthusiasm and with the benefits you have in this country, you can provide leadership to a large group of people and really provide real value throughout Southeastern Europe. And of course, one of the great benefits of the Humphreys program is the networks that you've made, not just here in Croatia, but in the United States and throughout the region. So I'm very happy to see that the alumni here from neighboring countries is able to network and to create some bonds and take this program out to all the people in the area. We have a lot to learn from each other, and I encourage you to take advantage of that knowledge and experience in the room. Many of you here are already doing that. Humphrey alumni include influential journalists, community leaders, academics, and politicians. And later this morning, you will hear from one of Croatia's most prominent Humphrey alumni, Member of Parliament and former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Vesna Pusic. And I look forward to hearing how your experience has helped shape look forward to hearing how her experience has shaped her career in the community. Humphrey Program, as part of the Fulbright program, is an integral part of the relationship between our two countries, and it has been here since the beginning. It's interesting that the Memorandum of Understanding for the Fulbright program, signed in October of 1992, was the first bilateral agreement between our countries following the recognition of the U.S. and Croatia. And it just shows you the importance the United States places on education and personal development. All of our countries are only as important and as valuable as all of our people. So if we can become educated, become optimistic, we can work together, we can achieve great things. This anniversary is a milestone in the Humphrey program, 40 years, and the relationship between our countries continues to be excellent. It's also a chance to look to the future, to new generations of Humphrey Fellows, and new collaborations between alumni around the world. I hope you find today's discussions inspiring. So let's celebrate. Sretan Rođen, happy birthday.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. And I'm also often asked what is the biggest difference between Croatia and America, and I also say enthusiasm. So let's hope that today's conference will be a small contribution to this enthusiasm that people with the experience of living and working in America can bring to Croatia. The Minister and the Ambassador have a very busy schedule, so we're going to let them go now, and we'll continue with our conference. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, this is enthusiasm. Okay.
Well, I believe now it's time for our story, and then we are going to hear more from our speakers from panelists, and of course to learn something through workshops. Maybe, okay, we have a video.
Humphrey Fellowship. Što to znači? 3 riječi. Perspective, perspektiva, change, promjena, friendship, prijateljstvo, forever, za uvijek.
My name is Adriana Vlasic. I'm an English teacher here from Zagreb, and I was a Humphrey Fellow at Penn State University 2014-15.
I'm Adam Matasic from the city of Split. I was Humphrey Fellow at Johns Hopkins University 2000-2001.
My name is Mara Chakaru. I was a Humphrey Fellow at Arizona State University at 2013-2014.
I'm Leila Lepic. I'm a Humphrey Fellow 2011-2012 at the University of Maryland, where I studied journalism.
Vedran Podolsky, Humphrey Scholar 2001, American University.
Humphrey Fellowship is something that teaches you how to become a leader in your country. And you know, each of us has different ways to become a leader and to be the leader.
Sa svim ljudima koje sam malo bliže upoznala za vrijeme moje godine u Arizoni, ostala sam u bliskom kontaktu, a to znači da je svijet uvijek tu. The world is always here, where you are, if you have friends all over the world.
Not that enthusiastic.
Credit goes to students and Professor Tena Pershin. She's here with us because they tried to put together some pictures and a few sound bites from Croatian fellows. And actually, I just tried to introduce our stories, how everything happened and why we decided to gather Humphrey fellows from this region in Zagreb.
You want me to start? Well, Marina and I were Humphrey Fellows last year, so 2017-2018 at Arizona State University. We met on a plane from Washington to Phoenix, and we got an email already, so we weren't even introduced as Humphrey Fellows yet, and we got an email saying the Humphrey Program is celebrating its 40th anniversary, and if you have an idea, and if you have something you would like to do, organize something, please apply. So for the first month and a half in Arizona, it was August, and you wouldn't believe how hot it is in Arizona in August. There wasn't, our families weren't with us, and we had some free time. So we decided to put together, a small project and try to pitch it. And with the great support of our professor, Dr. Bill Silcock, who was our mentor for the whole time, he just wouldn't let go. He saw it there and he said, we're going to give this to the State Department, we're going to give this to the IAE, and he did. So we pitched our project in Washington, D.C. during the Global Leadership Forum. We spoke to a lot of people about it. We already created a network of alumni. We sent out a short questionnaire asking them how they would like this event to happen. And it finally began to happen in August this year. We had a government shutdown in the meantime. That didn't help in the process, but we managed to put it all together, and this is why we're here today.
And the idea was to challenge ourselves to identify the key issue in this region. And we, during discussion at the Ronald Reagan Airport, decided it's a brain drain. And I'm sure that Croatia, as my country, Bosnia, and this region is facing with problem of leaving for good a lot of young, well-educated people. And we actually tried to show you how Humphrey Fellowship and other fellowships and programs try to reverse that process, like from brain drain to brain gain, how we could do something concrete in our society to help young, well-educated people to stay and improve our lives and our countries in this region.
So this is how it all happened. I'm very pleased to welcome today in Zagreb our friend from the IIE, a director from the office from Budapest, Cheryl Francisconi, and I would like to ask you to say a few words.
Ambassador Cohorst and all of our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear Humphrey Fellows, I'm so delighted to be with you today from Budapest, representing IIE. On behalf of IIE and all of our colleagues at the U.S. State Department, Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs, I really extend our warmest welcome to you for this wonderful day. And thank you especially to Mila and Marina for the incredible job you've done. I know what it takes to put on an event like this, and it's very challenging, and this is the result. You've done a tremendous job. We're very happy. I also want to give a thanks to our colleagues at the Institute for the Development of Education. You may not know this about them, but they are also a partner with U.S. Department of State Education USA Network. They host the Croatia Education USA Advising Center. And in a former role of mine, I worked closely with them, so it's lovely to be with Nino and Nina and your team. Thank you so much for what you've done as well. This is one of a series of global events to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Humphrey Program. And so we're very delighted to be part of it. And as I think all of you know, or hopefully all of you know, that the program was named for our the former Senator and Vice President of the United States, Hubert Humphrey, founded in 1978 in his name because he believed so much about international cooperation and mutual understanding. And so this program was established in his name. And it gives this opportunity for leaders around the world to spend an academic year in the United States, both for academic training, non-degree training, but also for wonderful opportunities to have professional affiliations in the United States. And I think that the fellows have been selected largely because of their leadership, both in the public and private sectors, and their demonstrated commitment to their countries. So it's an impressive group of people. Since the inception of this program in 1978, more than 5,800 fellows have been selected from around the world in 157 countries and more than 40 universities, and we're so happy today to have one of our most important university partners from Arizona State, Dr. Silcock, here as well. So you know how important the program is, and I'm echoing the words of the ambassador and the minister as well. For all of the past 40 years, IIE's worked closely with State Department to implement this program. And during this anniversary year, we really want to acknowledge the extraordinary professional achievements of all of you Humphrey Fellows and the impact that you have in your countries. Your leadership is so important, and we want to continue to learn from you so that we can build that learning back into the program so future generations of Humphrey Fellows will be able to have amazing experiences like you have. This conference today demonstrates brain gain in the Balkans, as you have so thoughtfully said in your introduction too. Represented here, we have 20 Humphrey Fellows from around the world. And whenever I get a chance to meet anyone who's graduated from any kind of program, whether it's US government or some other scholarship program, I'm so reminded about the power of international education and how important these exposures, these relationships are. And this program is no different. Many of the Humphrey Fellows I've met, I have some friends who have been Humphrey Fellows for 30 years or longer, almost since the beginning. And everyone I have ever met is so committed, like these two women and all of you, to staying engaged with your cohort of friends you've met from around the world, from your home country, and from your contacts in the United States. And I think that's very, very important. We know that you've tailored your Humphrey experience to meet your professional goals, but that you also bring those professional goals back to your countries to make a difference. And as others have said, we do remain concerned about the issues of brain drain in the region. But I think it's important to note that mobility in education allows us to deepen our connections, our engagement, and bring those connections and engagements back to our home country, and we'll continue to see that happening. And I can't think of a more fitting example of brain gain than the strong potential the Humphrey Fellows and the Humphrey Program has to continue to collaborate and bring back these connections to our countries. So when you leave here today, I really encourage you to continue to be a wonderful ambassador for the program and to stay in touch with each other, to leverage each other's connections, expertise, to also stay in touch with your embassies. You know, embassies have some funding for fellowship for alumni engagement, so pay attention, stay in touch. I know the embassies in your countries will be really happy to hear from you and keep in touch with you and appreciate your engagement. And in some cases, Fulbright commissions, I think, for the Hungarians here. Reach out to younger alumni. As the ambassador said, you know, you have an influence. You can be mentors and advisors and influential to younger people about what they're experiencing in their home country. And do keep in touch with us. Do keep in touch with IIE, because we want to make sure you get notifications about programs like this and any other kinds of opportunities that might come your way. So make sure we have your contact information and keep engaged. I'm so delighted to be here to learn with you and be part of these discussions on how we can focus on cross-collaboration for brain gain in the Balkans. And I wish you all a very successful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for your kind words. During our Global Leadership Forum, it's a place where all the fellows gather in Washington, D.C. In the first months of our fellowship. We had a reception at the State Department. And during that reception, I think it was the Deputy Secretary who was trying to point out the most prominent Humphrey Fellows around the world. And at that point in time, I was very proud that one of them was our former Minister of Foreign Affairs and a Member of Parliament, Vesna Pusic. Can you please say a few words?
Hello, friends and colleagues. To start by thanking Mila and Marina for getting us together. It's a first for me. Although I've been a Humphrey Fellow, started my Humphrey Fellowship in this strange, unbelievable, and to some extent dreaded year of 1984. Because obviously of the Orwell's novel, a lot of people born in the 20th century were dreading this 1984. It turned out it was a very good year for a lot of people. It was certainly a very good year for me. It was a year in which I defended my doctoral thesis. It was a year in which I seriously fell in love. And it was the year when I got my Humphrey Fellowship. And I went to the American University to Washington, D.C. and had a wonderful time in every respect. It was an experience of growing up intellectually, but also socially in many ways. It was a year of making friends. One of the best friends I made there 35 years ago is currently the foreign minister of Guinea in West Africa, Makale Kamara, and we actually did stay in touch. Lost a bit of touch over the years a little, but then gained. We supported each other while we were in Washington, especially the early months when we were sort of trying to find our way around and get somehow included. And then towards the end, we felt like true Washingtonians. We're were absolutely in control of everything. And it was also a year where I, at the American University, under the great guidance and tutorship of Professor Steve Arnold at that time, gained new knowledge, but also gained a little bit of this spirit that you described here and that the ambassador also mentioned. And this is the sense that you can do anything you want. I came with a little bit of that already, but that somehow, that experience confirmed this sense, and that the least you can do is try and get involved in things. At that time, it's a very different time. Hubert Humphrey's sister was still alive, and she would come to our leadership meetings, and we had an opportunity to talk to her. A number of people from all over the world have gone on to become important leaders in different areas in their countries. It was not that long after actually Hubert Humphrey died, and we were extremely proud that we were also on a program that had his name. It was a program, as you know, established by President Carter, but got the name of Hubert Humphrey in order to recognize one of the Americas and probably world's greats. As all the important great people, Humphrey had a very complicated, to say the least, political career. Being an enlightened politician, but also somebody who understood realpolitik, being somebody who was in office either in the Senate or as vice president at very complicated and difficult times in America. Being somebody who has been great in forging bipartisan initiatives in the Senate and establishing or introducing some of the key legislation, obviously for America, but also, I would say, for the world at large, such as the Civil Rights Act, such as some of the Medicare and some of the important legislation that has been around for many, many years. But I would say the two things that he cared about the most, and in a way they're reflected in the title of his autobiography, The Education of a Public Man. The two things that he valued the most was education and public service. And in that, I would agree completely. It goes for every country, but particularly for countries like ours in this region that are new as independent polities, so to speak, that are in a region where we can have more, where our influence or positive influence as countries and as people, I would say, are more important than our size would justify. Primarily because of our location, but to some extent also because of our history. So having a positive, stabilizing, enlightened influence is something that would produce more effect than one would on the whole expect from countries of this size. Therefore, our engagement is, I would say, even more important than under other circumstances. And over many years of my both academic, civil society, and political career, one thing that I believed when I started and believe even more today is that everybody should, at least for part of her or his life, get involved in the public domain, in the public sphere, in the business of finding better ways of organizing our lives as societies. And that can be by getting involved in politics in the narrow sense, electoral politics. That can be by getting involved in your community. And for that, what you need is, I would say, common sense. You need some civic courage. Not only because of the volatile politics in our region, but also because it takes some civic courage to stand in front of a group of people, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and speak your mind. This is something that the Humphrey experience, the Humphrey Fellowship experience, definitely helped us do. I know that this is something that Humphrey Fellowship experience definitely helped me do. And to follow in the footsteps of Hubert Humphrey, I would say that in this region, probably even broader than that, but certainly in our region where we can do something. The two things Humphrey believed in, education and public service, are extremely important. There have been, I would say they're somehow in the foundation of what our problems are and what we have to do and where we have to go. I will just mention two surveys that were done relatively recently. One is the Democracy Index that's done by the Economist, the journal, the weekly, measuring the levels of democracy, not to go into the entire methodology, but over 5 key indicators in 167 countries. And the other is the PISA test, and that is a test for 15-year-olds, so elementary school graduates, or in our system, or first-year high school students, measuring the quality of education in math, sciences, and literacy. They do that in the last data we have, they did it last year, but we don't have data yet, but the last data we have is for 2015. In both things, we as a region are lagging behind. Some are better, some are worse, but Croatia is the best, being the 40th out of 72. Everybody else is below that, which I think is, for us, a serious issue. Even Europe isn't doing so great. And out of 28 member states of the European Union, only one, the tiny Estonia, is in the first 10 in math. Only 2 are in the first 10 in sciences, Estonia and Finland, and only 3 in literacy, Estonia, Finland, and Ireland. As far as democracy goes, we are either flawed democracies or hybrid states, hybrid governments, let's say. So that's between autocracy and democracy. So that there is a lot of work. There is a lot for us to do, to get involved individually, to get involved as groups, to get involved as professionals, to get involved as moms, dads, as community organizers, as journalists, as scientists, as business people. There is a lot of work both in increasing the quality of education in our countries, and I think one of the ways of doing that is definitely through cooperation, and improving the quality of our governments. One way of doing that is getting involved. I would say the only way of doing that is getting involved. And if there's one thing that Humphrey Fellowship taught us, and the Humphrey experience, and our friends there that we met from different countries from around the world taught us, is get involved. Thank you very much.
Now, remind me on different types of leadership. We discussed and learned a lot during Humphrey years. But our mentor, Dr. Bill Silcock, emphasized that servant leadership should be our top priority. And we have never forget that. So how many, just stay there for a second, how many of us were so lucky to have as a mentor, as a professor, as a leader, and as a friend, Dr. Bill Silcock? Okay. So Dr. Bill knows that without his leadership and his mentorship and his help and pushing all the time that we could succeed, that we could do this or that, we couldn't do this project, this event, but also many other projects worldwide. So warmly please welcome Dr. Bill Silcock from Arizona State University. This is your floor, please.
I hate standing behind a podium, and don't worry, this is not going to be death by PowerPoint, I promise you. I just have a few things I want to say, and it's a privilege to be here speaking to this great group at this great moment. While they worry about the logistics going on behind the scenes, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, don't pretend, don't ignore what's going on up there. I've taken away 2 or 3 really important things so far in what I've heard this morning. Being student-centric. That's also being leadership-centric, right? That's one of the things that we're focused on. And finding better ways to organize ourselves, which I just heard about. And we appreciate the ambassador staying just a few minutes longer and to learn. And what a great example that he's willing to learn. I think that's a lesson to me and a lesson to all of us. I don't know language very well. I hope the spelling is correct. I'm sure I'll be corrected if it's not, but dobro jutro. And good morning to all of you from the Cronkite School at Arizona State University, America's largest public institution on 4 different campuses. And at the Cronkite School, we're focused on a teaching model of journalism education. So pretend that the patient is the citizen and the journalist is the doctor. So we bring them together to try to find new ways to help citizens connect and become civically engaged at the Cronkite School. And specifically in our little 4th floor office where the Humphrey Fellows found their home, we are focused on engaging globally. And we do that for the students and the staff and the faculty so that if they see the world and the world comes to them every year as Humphrey Fellows come into our campus and mingle with our students, then these students know the world a little bit better and maybe they're wiser to report the world. You know, Hubert Humphrey said one of the paramount leadership qualities of life are these lasting friendships that we've heard about. 91 fellows from 56 countries have so far graced the halls of the Cronkite School. And I'm privileged to speak this morning on behalf of a whole host of universities in the United States who have been Humphrey Fellow host campuses for 40 years. And many of them doing an excellent job in wonderful fields from law to medicine to journalism. These are the Humphrey Fellows that have been at the Cronkite School from this part of the world. Some of them you'll recognize. Many of them have gone home and continue to do wonderful things. During this time of the Humphrey leadership, as Marino said, we focus a lot on trying to understand what a leader is, and many of them read great books like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the things that the fellows have taught me is to seek first to understand, then to be understood. That's his 5th principle, and it's an important one. And each of the fellows comes with a little miracle in their mouth. They speak a language I do not speak. And I feel very embarrassed. My parents sent me to Paris as a college student to learn French, and I'm really bad at it. But they come to the Cronkite School speaking English, speaking their native language, often 3 or 4 different languages. And so I want to talk for just a moment about the languages of leadership during this year of growth that the Humphrey Fellows had. To talk about that, let me take you to a photograph of a picture, a painting called Fallen Monarchs. Imagine yourself in one of these beautiful forests here in the Balkans, and you see these beautiful tall trees like Serbian kings and Balkan kings and the Montenegro kings. I know Dark would be mad if I didn't mention Montenegro and their great kings. But when the trees die and fall down in the forest, something happens. As they die and decay, new saplings grow, and roots and growth happens. And so what happens, as this artist, his name's William Bliss, talks about, these are fallen monarchs. They're literally like kings or queens in the forest. And he said about this painting that these trees wave not less proudly than because of those who have gone on before them. 40 years of Humphrey Fellows around the world have gone on. We've been privileged to have some of them at the Cronkite School building on that. So the Humphrey Leadership Voyage that every fellow takes, and every fellow tries to understand what it means to be a leader, and many of them come to our campus already being a leader, but they learn about leadership from folks like Stephen Covey, or from the great examples of history like Sir Ernest Shackleton, who went down to Antarctica with a mission, and it went upside down when his boat got stuck, and his mission changed. He wasn't going to be the first to set a record in Antarctica. Instead, he was going to save every life on board that boat, and he did. So Humphrey Fellows learn about overcoming obstacles, and they confront new ideas. We're talking about brain drain and brain gain. So we're going to have a lot of things swirling around in our heads today, so I hope we're going to engage with each other and through the electronics, socially, so that we can find new ways to save this beautiful part of the world. American documentary filmmaker Ken Burns, he talks about ideas that sometimes might scare you a little bit. Darko later on in his presentation is going to talk about an idea that he's come up with. But Burns has a film studio in upstate New York, Florentine Films, and on his studio wall is this quote. And he says, "We are all looking for ideas large enough to be afraid of again." Burns has done American documentaries, the most recent one about Vietnam. "If the idea does not scare him, it's not worth doing." This idea of fear. Now, I don't know if this is translated correctly. Someone's going to correct me. But if it is, I hope so. If not, we'll fix it later. But this is the same message in sort of your language. We're all looking for ideas. Sorry, Sabi, it's not in Hungarian. But we're all looking for these ideas large enough to be afraid of again. So talk about fear for a second and talk about leadership. You may remember this movie, Life of Pi. The fear of the tiger. That's really what this tiger in the boat symbolized. How do I overcome my fear? Fear is life's only true opponent. Only fear can defeat life. And fellows, through their Humphrey year, wherever they were in Arizona or Washington, D.C., they learned how to turn fear into faith. Now, one of your great writers from this part of the world, who I read 3 or 4 of his books in English, has this wonderful quote. I'm not going to read it out loud to you, but the most important point of it at the very end is he or she did it not himself know how, when, or where, but it would be found someday that they would find the way to do what they had the passion to do. And that's really what these fellows are all about. So now very quickly, 3 principles that I've learned from listening to the languages of 91 different fellows from 56 countries. The language of communication, the language of service, which Marina mentioned just a few minutes ago, and we'll end with the language of hope. So the language of communication, we're all on these new devices, we're learning new things, we're learning new skills. And in the United States, when they come to do that, they're learning it in political circles. They're watching the President of the United States use social media in new and innovative ways that has changed the world. I will make no other comment about that, but that is factual, that how he has harnessed the power of Twitter has changed the world. And that's one of the things the fellows have learned in the United States, as they've come to understand the fabric of the society in which they live. The fellows themselves stay engaged in broadcasting, in being on, in writing articles. Holger from Estonia worked for BuzzFeed and Wired magazine, producing really excellent articles, even while he was still a Humphrey Fellow. And they've learned about how to build relationships through the power of communication. And they've done that as they learned about how Americans celebrate the holidays, how Americans do crazy things with pancakes, very different from what's done in Croatia, and how Americans like to serve. The language of service, this idea of servant leadership, which has been mentioned, is an important principle that IIE instills in all of the coast campuses as we try to understand how to understand what leadership is about. And we have great examples of global leaders, thank you, from Gandhi to Mother Teresa to Martin Luther King. And the fellows themselves may not make the global headlines. They may not be written about in the history book, but the way they have impacted individual lives of American college students or host families or Native Americans that they met on the reservation has changed people's lives. And they've done that through giving of their time and their talents. and actually getting involved in community service. The first food bank in the world was in Phoenix, Arizona, St. Mary's Food Bank. Finally, the language of hope, which is what every Humphrey Fellow wants to strive to have, what we hope that we might do. Inspiring hopes in times of anger or angst allows a kind of loving kindness to heal some individual heartaches as well as global despair. And a year ago, we met in Wailita's beautiful home here in downtown Zagreb and had kind of the first nucleus of a Humphrey anniversary event, and look at how it's grown today. And it will echo around and around and around. Final thought, because I recognize some folks in here are not Humphrey Fellows, but many of you are, and want to follow in the footsteps of these two wonderful ladies. What are 3 things you can do, and IIE will help you, and so will the U.S. State Department help you, to have successful workshops, alumni events like this? Find champions. Here were 2 right here. Without these 2, we wouldn't be here today. They were champions. They figured out how to communicate, both to Washington, D.C., to other stakeholders who might have some funds, probably even the logistics that Mila was doing this morning at 7 a.m. talking to the hotel. So it's all about communication. And finally, it's about the connections that can be made through NGOs and partnerships that allow all of this to happen. Let me close with a final thought. Communication, service, and hope are just 3 of the many important words in the language of leadership. I have seen fellows not just from the Cronkite cohort, but others during the Global Leadership Forum or at alumni events speak these same true terms the way they live their lives. They've kind of understood what it means to have the sense of light and carry it forward. It's hard to see, but those of you from Belgrade may recognize this is the bridge between old and new Belgrade. And I took this picture very early one morning out of the Hotel Balkans, which sadly doesn't exist anymore. But it inspired me then, and it inspires me now. And I went to my undergraduate education at Brigham Young University, and there we learned this idea that we enter to learn and we go forth to serve. And that's a lot what Humphrey Fellows do. They take a year off to learn something and then spend the rest of their lives in powerful service. And we've seen legacies of that and heard about that this morning. At the Cronkite School, we have 6 stories, and if you decide you're going to walk instead of taking the elevator, you walk up through this window, and it's actually a piece of artwork called Windows of Light. And it inspires everybody who takes a moment to pause, and it's better at night than it is in the day, to kind of think about how the reflectivity of light inspires each of us to move forward. We do not stand still. Humphrey Fellows do not stand still. Hubert Humphrey did not stand still. There's a Western American poet named William Safford who said in one of his lines, "Some monuments move." We think of the great monuments in Washington, D.C., like Lincoln and now the Martin Luther King monument. And it's beautiful, it's marble, it's stone, it's inspiring. But Safford says, some monuments don't stand there, they move. And when we take the fellows to Monument Valley, as we will here in another 3 weeks, and as we did with all of the Humphrey Fellows that come to Cronkite, they are inspired by what they see there. And let me close with Humphrey's quote. "A leader is one who summons the best from others as he calls upon the best within himself to join in the common cause and the common purpose of leadership." Thanks very much.
I think now most of you are aware where we got our inspiration from. Dr. Bill was our mentor for a full year, and we had these kind of thoughts from him on a daily basis. Without further ado, now I would like to present some of our Humphrey Fellows, our showcases for today. So please come on over. Holger Ronema from Estonia. Slavoj Spanish from Hungary. Darko Ivanovic from Montenegro. And Daniela Vujanic from Croatia.